welcome to Zero's Game Room, where all things gaming takes place. Interviews, discussions, and the latest gaming news. So take a seat, get comfortable, adjust your headset, because it's game time. Here's your host, Zero.
Welcome to Zero's Game Room, the podcast where we talk about all things gaming. We have discussions, we have debates, and today we're going to have a little bit of a history lesson. And don't you worry, this is going to be fun-filled, because with me, my guest today is the Vice President of the University of Laverne's Gamers Guild, Sean. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Zero. Thank you for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no. And let me tell you, we're going to have a fun show today, because even though it's a history lesson, it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about games galore, hot games that are out, things, and just all things gaming. And that's what this podcast is about. Let's talk about some Pong.
So, I'm a computer science major, and our professor likes to go through like the history of the internet, usually in every class, unfortunately. And so one of the things that we generally talk about is Pong.
Really? How does that get brought up?
Yeah. He kind of just goes through like the evolution of computers. He starts with Alan Turing and he kind of goes up through the ages, and he touches on Pong very quickly, but like he mentions it and we talk about it for a minute and then we move on. But October of 1958, physicist William Higginbotham created what is thought to be the first video game. This is from APS.org. It's some news site, but he created what was essentially Pong.
Right. It was like with a radar, right?
Yeah. It was with a radar at the time. And it was at Brookhaven National Laboratory. And apparently it had a bunch of people who like to come in and just play Pong. And in the 70s, it became, the video game that we all know today. I think it was on the Atari at the time.
Yeah, it was the Atari 2600. And they had their own consoles, too. Like, there was different, like, reiterations of Pong. Like, it was Pong Mania, kind of how, like, Pac-Mania was when Pac-Man came out.
Oh, Lord, Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Dude. Pac-Man's great. I love Pac-Man.
Oh, yeah. Who doesn't love a good game of Pac-Man, And that's the beauty of gaming. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today. The accessibility games have come. How far have we really come? We used to, the simplest thing, and granted, you could still do this today, but back in the old days, you went to things like Blockbuster, these things where you would rent video games. You might not remember this. Do you remember them, Sean?
Dude, I remember Blockbuster specifically because of one specific reason. So my first video game was StarCraft for the PC.
Ooh, StarCraft, nice.
Yeah, I love StarCraft. And so the way that StarCraft came out eventually on the Nintendo 64. It was a really crappy port, and it was not all that great, and you had to play a full-fledged RTS with a controller. That's just a terrible idea in and of itself. Halo Wars be exempted because it was made specifically for it. StarCraft was not. And so you had to command this giant army, and if anyone knows StarCraft, it's a giant micromanagement game, basically. And trying to do that on a controller is terrible in the first place. And trying to do it on the Nintendo 64 is even worse. But we eventually ended up renting StarCraft for the Nintendo 64 from Blockbuster. And we eventually just had it so long, because we never took it back, that they called us and just told us that it was ours now.
Oh my gosh. That's
Instead
insane.
of just asking for us to pay for it or like, to get the late fee down, they just told us it was ours.
Right. Oh my gosh. Wow. And like that was the thing. I remember going to a Blockbuster and renting like Punch-Out, It's like, oh, Mike Tyson. I don't know who that is, but I want to punch things. That was the thing. That was my motivation to buy Punch-Out, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out for the NES. And then I eventually came up and I had a Super Nintendo, then I had a Nintendo 64. And, that's kind of been my gaming history. Gaming has come a long way. But, fast forward a couple of years, and now we're in this age where there's a lot of things digital, and we have a lot more advanced technology. We have things like, right now, we have the PS4, we have the Xbox One, we have the Nintendo Switch, and of course, the holy grail that a lot of people seem to look forward to is the PC gaming realm, which you are an expert.
I mean, yeah. Relatively, yeah.
Talk a little bit about why, or your passion with the PC world.
So, like I said, I started out playing StarCraft on the PC. When I was like 3 or 4 years old, my brother, he got a laptop when he was around 12 or 13 at the time, and he got a laptop. He put StarCraft on it, and I was watching him play, and he goes, "Hey, do you want to learn how to play?" And I, of course, said yes. My big brother trying to teach me how to play a game? Hell yeah! And so he picks me up, sets me on his lap, and he taught me how to play StarCraft. And ever since then, I was just enthused with gaming. And then as the years went by, I played a bunch of Counter-Strike 1.6. I played a bunch of Call of Duty. That was actually on the Xbox. I played a bunch of Call of Duty on the Xbox. And then I eventually made my own PC, and I've kind of stuck with it ever since. In terms of accessibility, I mean, nowadays, like you said, before Steam, before digital, purchases, we all had to go out to Blockbuster or GameStop, and nowadays that's still around, just very much less so, because now we have Steam. Now we have even the Xbox Store. We have Uplay. We have Humble Bundle. We have all these different methods of gaining access to these games, and it's really, really nice.
Now, I want you to touch base a little bit on Uplay, because believe it or not, there are people who don't know what that is. So talk about Uplay a little bit.
So Uplay is Ubisoft's version of Steam, and if for those of you who don't know what Steam is,
yeah,
Steam
maybe you should explain first. We should talk about what Steam is. It's not something that comes out of your tea kettle if you're making tea.
Well, I mean, it is, but not this iteration. There we go. So Steam is a digital library of games, and now it's games and movies, and I think even some manga and comics. But
yeah, you can download a lot of things on there that I didn't know was accessible.
Yeah, I saw a sale the other day. It's a digital library where you can purchase a bunch of games, and it's usually very heavily discounted because of the way that Steam works. Because in the PC world, people who make games, they can just go, hey, here's 30% off, here's 40% off, and they don't have to go through anyone like Microsoft or Sony or anything like that. It can just be discounted, and it's great. And so Steam is incredibly reliable in that sense, in the sense that games are heavily discounted, you can purchase them really easy, and you can get them digitally. And Uplay is Ubisoft's version of Steam, and so they only sell Ubisoft games.
So what are some of the games on by Ubisoft that you can play on Uplay?
Most recently, I would say Jesus Lord. What is his name? Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon. Yeah, there we go. Ghost Recon Wildlands just came out. Me and Jack have actually been playing that a lot. Otherwise, you can find Assassin's Creed on there, Rainbow Six Siege, another Tom Clancy game, Watch Dogs, The Division, Far Cry. Other than that, I don't really think there's all that much to go around in terms of Uplay.
Right. It's mostly the powerhouse that is Steam, because I have Steam. I'm fairly new to it, but I do have my Steam account, and I have a couple of games on there. And I will say some of the things surprise me on there, because let's look on a console. Console games, depending on how good they are, let's say they're a hit, very popular on console is things like Kingdom Hearts, which I don't believe have a PC port yet, do they?
No, they don't.
So Kingdom Hearts games, and I'm a huge fan, they hardly, if ever, go down in price. It's kind of like Pokemon games. That's another thing. It's very hard for those games to go down in price. They might go drop a couple dollars, but to say the amount of stuff that happens on Steam and stuff, like the sales that happen on there, are crazy. Like, for example, the Steam Summer Sale. Talk about that a little bit.
So, for those of you who don't know, the Steam Summer Sale is, I think it's like a 2 or 3 week sale that Steam has every summer, hence the name, in which I would say at least half of the entire library of Steam is heavily discounted. You can find, major AAA titles that are $60 originally, priced down to $20 or $30, and it's a consistent flow too. I mean, it's not just random games that you'd never want to play. I mean, I know that I've gotten Dark Souls 3 for like $20. I've gotten I think that Counter-Strike Global Offensive is usually like half off, so it's like $10. A lot of the Call of Duties are like $10 or $20. The Mass Effect series are usually discounted. The Fallout and Skyrim series are usually heavily discounted. I think that the Skyrim Special Edition that just came out was even down to like $20.
It was like $20-something. I know recently another game that was on sale that a lot of people might like is Borderlands. Like the complete collection was about like $10 for like 3 games. And to me, that was just insane because they do flash sales too. There's always things on sale on Steam. And that's kind of like the beauty of the accessibility that Steam has.
Is being able to just have so many games and being able to allow people or rather allow developers to, give it out to people at a really discounted price, which is really nice for us as consumers.
Right. And there's kind of something that's a little bit beautiful in my eyes about PC and like Steam. It gives way to innovation, like indie games. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at one of my favorite games, not because I play it all the time or because I think it's super invigorating. It has really good gameplay, but is Stardew Valley. I'm not sure if you've heard of Stardew Valley.
I love Stardew Valley.
So Stardew Valley, I don't know how much you know about like the development of the game, but it was made by one guy. It was made by one guy, and he basically poured his heart and soul into creating Stardew Valley because he realized that there was no real Harvest Moon for PC, and so he set about making it, and he did. And within, I think it was like the first week, there were over 1 million sales. I know personally, I have bought 3 or 4 different copies of Stardew Valley, one for myself and then a couple for other people, simply because I want to support the developer. And I don't think that that's exactly something that you find on console.
I would wholeheartedly agree. It creates this community on PC, And I love Stardew Valley, and I think that's the best way to describe it. It's like Harvest Moon, and for those who don't know, Harvest Moon is literally like kind of like a farm life simulator. How would you describe it, Sean?
I think that a farm life simulator is a pretty good way to go about it. I think that I was never a big fan of Harvest Moon prior to Stardew Valley. I still haven't actually played a Harvest Moon game, but from what I've taken from it, it's very much a farm life simulator. You can raise a farm, you get animals, all that good stuff, and you can have a relationship. You can have children,
you can even
and stuff like that.
And you have to remember. Well, you don't have to, but it's like one of those things where like you're living your life. You find out about people, you talk about people, you learn their birthdays, you can give them birthday presents, you do missions, you build your farm, and you create this life for yourself.
It's really, really fun, and I remember when the game first came out, I played the game literally nonstop. Jack can attest to this, that like I played the game nonstop for about 3 days. I just didn't sleep. I was so engrossed in the game, and I loved the people in the game. I loved the personality that all the characters had. I loved even the simplistic combat that the game has. It was so much fun to me. And admittedly, I really haven't touched it since then, but that 3-day stint was fantastic.
Right, and you kind of have to admit, again, going back to the idea of like history, accessibility, look at how far we've come, The art style, and that's there's just so many things to talk about. Like, for example, we've come a long way, we have things like this, but when you look at Stardew Valley, its art style is very interesting. It's not all these it's not like super in-depth, detailed, realistic type graphics. It's adorable. It really is.
Yeah, it's mainly pixel art, and Again, it was made by one guy. This one guy took it upon himself to learn how to make music, learn how to do pixel art. He wrote the story for it. He coded the whole thing, which, for an aspiring developer, is something that I really, really look up to. So I have to mention that. But like you said, the art style is fantastic, and I think that it fits the game so beautifully. I think that if it was in any other kind of art style, if it was in a full 3D world, if it was rendered realistically, it just wouldn't have the same feel to it.
Yeah, I think it would really Stardew Valley would lose its charm. But let's look at this also. Look at how a story is told nowadays. Back then, it was kind of simple story arcs. Mario goes out, saves the princess, boom. You had Legend of Zelda, again, save the princess. I feel like that was the main theme back in the day. Save the girl, save the princess, save the beauty, right?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, looking back at Mario and Zelda, they were pretty simplistic in its time. And people, even if you come just a couple years after that, like let's look at the Nintendo 64 with Ocarina of Time. Yeah, it still has that same principle of save the princess, but the way that you go about it and the story that is told through that method and the amount of relationships that you build and the people that you meet.
Oh yeah, character development.
It's fantastic.
You've brought these characters to life. Like, I remember when Super Mario 64 hit the shelves, this was incredible, because there was this thing called voice acting. What? Princess Peach writes me a letter to invite me to cake? The cake is a lie?
What a terrible use of reference there. I'm sorry to say, Zero. But, I have to admit, and I might get a lot of hate for this. I'm not a huge fan of Super Mario 64.
It's okay. It's okay. It hasn't aged well at all, honestly. It's a gem back in the day. Now, not so much.
I get that. But like you said, going back, it was this very simplistic method of saving the princess of this very simple goal. I mean, look at Pong. It was just playing Pong. It's just table tennis. And nowadays we have these really complex stories and these fantastic character development and the like I said, the relationships that you build. If we look at a game like Mass Effect, for example, I'm gonna bar Andromeda here. I'm looking at more specifically Mass Effect 2. It's my favorite in the series, and I think that it's the one that you build the most relationships, the most meaningful relationships in. I can't tell you how many people, myself included, always bring Garrus along because Garrus is a badass and he's your best friend, and you want him right there on the battlefield every single time. I can't even imagine another game like that. The only one that I can really think of is something like Witcher, and even then,
The Witcher, yeah.
I am a huge fan of Witcher. And
it's an amazing game.
Why, yes, it is. Yes, it is, my friend.
It's never ending, and there's this grand adventure, Well, it's not never ending, but it feels never ending, and you're just this epic guy,
Geralt is this wonderful character, and I love the storytelling in that game purely because you look at it from one person's perspective and you're able to kind of understand and even relate it to today's standards. This fictional world that has witches being burned at the stake, and you can relate that to today's modern world, and you're like, wow, like there's some parallels there.
Right?
And that's
yeah,
not okay.
Definitely. And that's the beauty of this whole development, this whole history of games, how far we've come. We went from minuscule pixels to grand adventures that you kind of feel a part. You feel for these characters now. Before you're just like, well, Mario dies, oh well. Now it's just like, I got to get this objective done. For example, me, I just recently finished Uncharted. The main protagonist is named Nathan Drake. I wanted to be Nathan Drake. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to be that guy. It's theming. And that's the beauty of it.
It's all so fantastic in my opinion, and like you said, going back to the early days of just playing Pong to Ocarina of Time to even Mass Effect and Witcher, and nowadays virtual reality is a big thing, and I'm a huge proponent for it. So I have to do a little shout out here. Virtual reality is this wonderful new exploration that we're getting into, where you can, instead of playing as Geralt, for example, you are now Geralt. You are this character in this world that you get to physically interact in, and I think that once we really nail down virtual reality, it will just broaden gaming horizons in general.
I agree. And there's a lot of games to look forward to. What are some games that you know about that you're looking forward to this upcoming 2017?
Actually, I haven't heard too many games coming out, but I know that what just came out, Nier Automata, is a huge game that just came out. I believe it was from Platinum, and it has been getting absolutely fantastic reviews. And even going back a little bit, it just came out, I believe it was yesterday. Bayonetta got remastered for the PC.
I know, I heard about that. Bayonetta, oh my gosh.
It's in 4K, 60 FPS, and it looks fantastic, and I've heard fantastic things about that. Otherwise, I really haven't heard of too many games coming out in 2017. I know that Prey's coming out. I've heard really, really good things about that. People are really, really excited for that.
One thing I want to end off with, and I just want to prove something here. Sean, how many games do you have in your Steam library?
My Steam library, I have 196 games.
That's 196 games. So that's the accessibility now, and you have it all in one convenient space.
And I should mention that they're all from, I have Counter-Strike 1.6 on here. I have the original Doom on here. I have the Stalker series on here. I have Fallout 3. I have games from pretty much every generation. I have the original Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I have all these different games that are all just on one library, and I can access them wherever I'm at any time.
Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of the accessibility. We've come far. We came from pixels. We have heroes we follow. And we don't have to have all this clunky... I'm not saying, some people love collecting, game cartridges and they love having the box art. But you have it all in one simple click away.
And nowadays, that's what everyone wants.
Yeah. But thank you, Sean, for coming on to Zero's Game Room. I love having you on here, and I hope I can bring you back again so we can talk more games, more stuff, and hot releases. How does that sound?
Dude, that sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Zero's Game Room. Want to give a special thanks to my graphics designer at Trekit on Twitter and at David_Ritter for voicing my intro. Keep up to date with the podcast by liking it on Facebook at Zero's Gaming Room and on Twitter at Zero's Game Room. Until next time, GG with a definite re.